All right, good afternoon. My name is Kathy Schultz. I am the Water Education Specialist with the California Department of Water Resources. I'd like to welcome everybody to Water Wednesday. Each year in April, the world celebrates Earth Day. The first Earth Day was held nearly 51 years ago on April 22nd, 1970. And on that day, 20 million Americans, which was about 10% of the population at the time, 20 million Americans came together to demonstrate support for protecting the environment and to demand action. And this was people across the nation, Democrats, Republicans, rich people, poor people, people from large cities, people from small rural communities, business groups, labor groups, as well as the many environmental organizations who had been working on different issues up to that point. And all of these people, all of these groups came together and united around the idea that we need to protect our environment, all parts of it. And in the years that followed, a number of laws were passed: the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and all of these have helped improve human health and save numerous species from extinction. 51 years on, though, there's still a lot to do. And this year's Earth Day theme, Restore Our Earth, reflects that. The mission of the California Department of Water Resources is to sustainably manage the water resources of California in cooperation with other agencies to benefit the state's people and protect, restore, and enhance the natural and human environments. And for the month of April, in honor of Earth Day, our Water Wednesday presentations are focusing on the restore part of our mission. I'm joined here today by Kamyar Gaveci, manager of DWR's Division of Planning, and Kamyar is going to be discussing flood managed aquifer recharge, a program or technique that helps restore groundwater basins. And this is incredibly important because groundwater is a key part of our water supply. Almost 85% of Californians depend on groundwater for at least some part of our water supply. So we all need to keep our groundwater basins healthy or bring them back to health if they're not currently quite there. And the program that Kamyar is going to be discussing is one way to help do that. Before I turn things over to Kamyar, just a quick Zoom overview for anyone joining us for the first time. Those who are back again, please bear with me. As you may have noticed when you joined, your cameras and microphones are off. This helps reduce the distractions, background noise that might cut into Kamyar's presentation. But we do want to hear from you. And so we have activated the chat box. It's down at the very bottom of your screen. Just take your cursor down there and click on it, and you can enter any questions that you have, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. We also have a caption feature. If you'd like to have closed captions on or off during the presentation, you just go a couple spaces over to the right from that chat box, and you can select the captions. That's it. That's Zoom. We've been using it for over a year now. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Kamyar. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this Water Wednesday. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to share with you the work we've been doing at the Department of Water Resources on what we call flood managed aquifer recharge. Now, that's a mouthful, but what it's really about is taking floodwaters and managing that water in a way that can put water into the ground. And we call that recharge. And aquifers are the part of our geology under the ground that stores that water for future use. So before we get started, I'd like to just share this photo that's on the cover slide. On one level, it looks like it is ponded water and a bunch of sticks. The photo shows a vineyard, and it's in the wintertime. That's why you don't see any foliage or leaves on the vines. And during the wintertime, water that's from flood events has been diverted from the channel and put on this vineyard. And the purpose of it is to let that water soak into the ground and recharge the aquifer. So one of the things I'd like to share with you before we get into the details of FloodMar is that California is on the western side of the US along the Pacific Ocean. And as a result, we have what we call a Mediterranean climate. And that means that we get most of our precipitation in the wintertime, and that we rarely, if ever, get at what's called an average or normal water year. Most often, we get water that's on the wet side and get flooding, or on the drier side and we get droughts. And in fact, this year, we had the third lowest amount of snowpack, the amount of snow we received, and the water that's within that snow. And so we're moving into a drought period. If you look at this timeline along the slide, the blue bars on the top are the flood events that we've experienced from the 1970s until 2018. And on the bottom are these brown bars, which are the droughts that we've experienced during that time. Now, the one that I really remember in 1986, that was one of our significant flood events, and I had levee duty. So I actually was on the levees inspecting them to make sure that they weren't going to fail. But then right after that very wet year, we had a 5-year drought. And then look at over here in 2008, I'm sure a time that many of you can remember, we had a 3-year drought, but in 2008, in the middle, we actually also had a flood. So in some years, we could be within a drought, but also have a flood event. Now, the other thing that's unique and changing in California is that climate change is making those extreme events more frequent and more consequential. So let me just explain what's on this slide. We took 120 years of flows in the American River, and we have plotted it on this graph from October 1st, here on the left side, through September 1st of the following year on the right side. So on this graph are 120 years of flow data for the American River. Now, we took the first 30 years and plotted them in gray. That represents more of the historic conditions, what we've experienced so far. And we took the last 30 years. That's what we predict may happen between 2070 and 2100 at the end of this century. And we plotted them in this brown or amber lines. Now, you can see a distinct difference between what we've experienced historically and what we anticipate and predict we're going to get in the future. And one of the things that jump out at us is that the peak flows in the wintertime, you see here, January, February, March, are higher will be higher in the future than what we experience historically. And then also the flows in the future are going to be lower in the summer months than we had in the future. And that's when there's a lot of use for that water for agriculture and watering our lawns and our urban landscapes. Now, a lot of the water systems, the water infrastructure, the facilities in California were designed and built based on what we knew as the historic hydrology. But with this future hydrology being so much different, that means higher and flashier flows in the winter and lower flows in the summer, we're going to have to rethink and reoperate and modernize a lot of our water infrastructure to be prepared for those changing conditions. This is one of my favorite graphics here on the right side of this slide, and it's what I call the water sector flower, because each of the petals of this flower represent one of the major sectors of water management. So water to basically manage or help the ecosystem, water for flood management, water for groundwater management, our water supply for farms and cities, water quality, and then water for people, like for recreation, and some use water for cultural practices. Now, historically, and even today, most of the people who work in these different sectors, they're in their own petal, and they work on the periphery where there's little overlap. You see, there's very little overlap on the edges of these petals between the sectors. But as we move toward the center of this flower, that's where we're going to become more sustainable, because the water sectors will be working together and there's more overlap between them. And that's what we mean by integrated watershed management. And that's where the water sectors will collaborate more effectively. That means communicate and exchange information, where each of the disciplines, like some are experts in the environment, others in flood management, others in groundwater management, others in water quality. They then bring their expertise, their discipline together on a team to plan for multi-benefit projects. Those are projects that actually do and achieve more than one thing. So for instance, a flood project that could also recharge the groundwater and provide water for the ecosystem. And then the other neat part is when the water sectors work together like that, they can bring their own pots of money together, which then together can help them implement those multi-benefit projects. So flood managed aquifer recharge, or FloodMar, is a really good example of what we mean by integrated watershed management. So in its simplest form, FloodMar is about taking those high peak flows in the wintertime, and it's often the water that people don't want. In fact, we try to manage that water so it doesn't cause damage or death, and use those peak flow waters to recharge our groundwater aquifers, and do it in a way to help the environment. And one way to get a lot of those benefits is to put the water on agricultural lands, working landscapes, and natural managed lands. So some of the traits of FloodMar is that it has to be voluntary, because as you know, the farmers they're private. They own the land, they have a business, and they're producing food for us. The public sector, like I work for government, we have to work together with the landowners, and it has to be voluntary. And FloodMar is multi-sector, and I'll show you more of that in the next slide. It's scalable. You know, some people are already doing FloodMar on one farm, and they've been doing that for 20 or 30 years, and they can do it because their farm happens to be next to a river or a channel that allows them to pull some of that high flood flows onto their land and spread it in the wintertime when they're not growing crops. But FloodMar can also be done on a watershed scale. And what we have found is that the larger the footprint of a FloodMar program, the more benefits you can get. It's multifaceted. So as I'll show you here in a minute, there's not one kind of FloodMar project. There's many different kinds of projects that together can achieve flood managed aquifer recharge. And here's the real important part. It is an untapped part of California's water portfolio. Another way of saying we can do a lot more of it in the future. So this slide on the left side, this is an illustration of what we think about when we say watershed. So you see it goes from the hills all the way down to the river and the landscape, the agricultural lands. What I'd like to do on this slide is show you how we can work from headwater at the top of the watershed all the way through groundwater to do FloodMar. So near the top of the watershed, we can do something called forecast informed reservoir ops. Now that's a mouthful to say. We now understand that most of the precipitation, the rain and the snow that California gets in the wintertime, comes in spurts, and we call those atmospheric rivers. And we're getting better at forecasting when that next atmospheric river is going to come from the Pacific Ocean and reach California, and where in California. And by knowing that, we'll be able to draw down the water in a reservoir before the atmospheric river gets there. And that creates more space to capture those higher peak flows and reduces flood risk. Now, to get that water out quickly, some of our reservoirs are going to need new and expanded gates, outlet gates, to be able to move the water out of the reservoir into the channel. Now, once it gets into the channel, we need new ways of conveying, moving that water from the reservoirs, those slugs of water that we're going to release, down the channel in a safe way. And so we will need to make new and expanded conveyance pipes and canals. But we can also use the floodplain, the natural infrastructure, nature's way of conveying water from the headwaters down into the lower valley. We need to have a better idea of which crops can take water on in the wintertime without affecting how much crops, fruits, grapes they'll produce in the coming years. So we need to find suitable areas to spread this floodwater on. And then we also have to find a way to compensate farmers and landowners to incentivize them being part of a FloodMar program. And then all ag land is not the same when it comes to recharging groundwater. Some of the soil is sandy and can take lots of water into the ground quickly. Others are clay, and it's more what we call a tight soil, and it's harder to get that water in. So we need better information about where are the high infiltration areas and use those areas for FloodMar. And we can spread this water on the ag lands in a way that attracts birds and provides water for terrestrial or land-based animals and plants. But also, as we recharge the groundwater, some of that then seeps back out into the channels where the fish are, and we can actually help the aquatic habitat. So how can we do more FloodMar in the future and more quickly? Well, one of the things we're going to have to do as a state is recognize aquifers as natural and green infrastructure, just like we do forests, wetlands, and the habitat along rivers, the riverine habitat. So once the state of California recognizes aquifers as natural infrastructure, then the public will be incentivized to provide public funding to get farmers and others to do more FloodMar projects. Now, we've got to preserve the recharge sites, the good recharge sites, and make sure that we don't pave over and build on top of those sites. And one of the ways that this all can work is by building strong partnerships as we work on doing the projects. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or your comments. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides so I can see things here.
All right, that's great. So it was really interesting. And I guess, when I started off the presentation, I mentioned that FloodMar is a way to recharge or restore our groundwater basins. But from what you're saying, it's a lot more than that. It can provide habitat as well. It can restore, I think it can even restore stream flow in the rivers. Is that correct?
Yes, and it can, and a real other important benefit is it can reduce flood risk, because with those peak flows being higher in the future in the rivers, we're going to have to do something to manage that risk, and FloodMar is one of those ways.
Okay, good. Nice multi-benefit project. Are all aquifers able to be recharged? You mentioned there at the end that there's like sandy soil and clay soil. How do we identify the places that are good for recharge and not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's an area that we need to and are doing a lot of work. In fact, all aquifers are not equal. And the other thing is, even within one aquifer, from 1 mile to the next mile, that can change. So we've got to have better information about the geology of those aquifers. And the Department of Water Resources is embarking on a statewide program to, from the air, do remote sensing so that we can get better information hundreds of feet down into the ground. And the way that works is a helicopter carries a monitoring device and flies along different areas, and that information, that electromagnetic signals go down into the ground and gets measured back, and we can actually see which are the areas that are higher infiltration and low, and those that are lower. Now, it doesn't mean that if it's an area that's lower infiltration, it can't be part of FloodMar, because in fact, it could be a holding basin where during a flood event, that area could become a pond or a temporary storage, and then that water can be moved to the more high infiltration areas later to get recharged into the ground.
Okay. It sounds like this type of project really calls on people from a lot of disciplines, like geologists and engineers, probably biologists. If somebody was interested in working on this, like FloodMar, this type of program, are there any sort of universal knowledge or skills that they should have?
Well, I think first and foremost is curiosity. So if you're curious and want to be a problem solver, that is going to help you in whichever discipline or expertise you get further education in or practice in. So in many respects, FloodMar, as I tried to show, brings and needs to bring multiple disciplines together.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who are really interested to find out more about where areas of research are needed, DWR actually did a research plan for FloodMar, and that's posted on our website. And you can actually go in, there's 13 different areas and disciplines that identified, 200 people came together and identified a number of research programs that will help FloodMar in the future.
Oh, okay, that's great. Let's see, I'm just running through the questions here. So you talked about, obviously, there's a lot of work being done with agriculture and farmers, and then you mentioned floodplains, like the one behind me is the YOLO bypass between Sacramento and Davis. Can we help create more wetlands by using FloodMar, or are there other locations that would work?
Yes, in fact, the Nature Conservancy, or some call it TNC, is doing what they call pop-up wetlands. And they're doing that using floodwaters on ag lands, and it's temporary. So over maybe only a 2-month period, they take, working with the farmers, water is diverted in the high flow periods during the winter, spread on the ag lands, and it attracts birds. So that's along what we call the Pacific Flyway. So birds that are migrating from north to south can land on these temporary wetlands and get food and forage.
Great. I think this looks like it might be our last question. But there's a question here. Is there consideration of the benefits of higher flows remaining in the river for fish protection? For example, some river juvenile salmon is significantly better during the high flow years compared to when only required minimum flows are in the river.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of those 13 areas in the research is about fisheries and aquatic habitat. So getting more and better information about the need for peak flows in the river and when it could be diverted onto ag lands, how much, so that it doesn't negatively impact the fish. But here's the other thing. If you recall that plot where I showed the future flows and the current flows, we're going to have much more higher peak flows in the winter than we do now. And so I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to use some of that water without adversely affecting the fish. And on the other side, as we recharge these groundwater basins, the water level, the water table comes up, and it then can flow and seep into the adjacent channels as what we call base flow. So some of the times when the fish are most stressed is during the dry season and in the droughts. So if we can use FloodMar as a way of taking those higher flows, putting it into the ground in the wet season, farmers using the groundwater during the dry season, leaving more of the water in the channel for the fish, that becomes an improvement to the aquatic habitat.
Wow, there's definitely a lot going on and a lot to consider there, isn't it?
Yes, but again, if you're curious and climate change is happening, and these changes are going to happen whether we like it or not. And it's better that we get out in front and prepare ourselves, the state, and our communities using, approaches like FloodMar, what we call integrated watershed management, to make it all work better.
And I think when you and I were talking previously, you said FloodMar also uses adaptive management. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because FloodMar, you have to understand what's changing. So when you do a project, you have to have monitoring. You have to measure, are things working the way we thought it would? And as we learn more, we can adapt and tweak our projects so that we get better outcomes.
Wonderful. Well, I apologize to the questions we didn't, or to the people who asked the questions we didn't get to, but we are about out of time. And I really want to thank Kamyar for joining us today and telling us about the FloodMar program, and everyone else who joined us from home. If you're interested in learning more about DWR programs, you can always visit our webpage, water.ca.gov. And as Kamyar said, we have a website dedicated to FloodMar as well. And if somebody was interested in learning more about those 13 identified research projects, is that where the report is available?
Yep, it's
Great.
called the Research and Data Development Plan.
Wonderful. I'm going to go check that out. If you have children at home and you're interested in helping them learn about California's water, we have a collection of free education materials. They're available to families and teachers. You can go to our website and order them as well, water.ca.gov/education materials. And again, if you're, we're coming up on Earth Day. It's next Thursday. If you want to learn more about what's going on around the world or in your local community for Earth Day, you can always visit their website as well. And because we all seem to be living online a lot these days, we also are on social media. DWR has a Facebook page. We have Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube as well. So you can always follow us on any of these social media sites. Comyard's presentation, as well as all of our past Water Wednesday presentations, are on our YouTube channel. We have an entire Water Wednesday playlist. So if you wanted to watch this again or share it with somebody, or learn a little bit more about groundwater or the importance of floodplains, all of those are available on our YouTube channel. We will be back next Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. with Melinda Doran, and she will be talking about the Salton Sea and some of the restoration work taking place there. This should be really, really interesting. The Salton Sea is a incredibly important part of California, and there's a lot of work to do down there. So she's going to be talking about that next week. Hope to see all of you then. In the meantime, have a great week. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us today.